Hey everyone, in these past few weeks we've reviewed the entire range of AMD Ryzen 4000 laptops from Asus, the ones available in stores at this point, but if you're still confused between them, this video should help make up your mind. We're not going to talk about the 17-inch TUF A17 here. That's the go-to choice if you must have a larger screen on one of these AMD laptops, and in fact it's one of the very few such options, as most of the other OEMs don't offer Ryzen power 17-inch models. Instead, we're going to look at the portable Zephyrus G15 and G14 models and how they compare to the mid-range and aggressively priced TUF A15. As far as the design and build go, the 14-inch Zephyrus G14 is obviously the more compact and the lightest of the three, as you can see here, but also the more premium feeling. Asus used magnesium and aluminum alloys for the entire chassis, which are great to the touch and do a good job at hiding smudges on both the grey and the white versions. The G14 also gets that matrix secondary display on the lid, which is an extra option and not available on all versions, so it's up to you if you want to pay for it or go with the simpler and slightly lighter variants instead. The two 15-inch models, on the other hand, are roughly the same size, with the G15 just marginally smaller and lighter by about 200 grams. They both get plastic interior constructions, with a smooth finishing on the G15 and the textured one on the A15s. The G15 is however only available in a black theme, with a black aluminum lid cover, while the A15s are available in two exterior versions. The grey one is also made out of aluminum, but the kind that actually feels nicer and hides smudges better, while the black one is plastic and mostly reserved for the lower tier configurations. Normally I'd be fine with black laptops such as the G15, but the materials on this one are highly prone to fingerprints and finger oil, and I'm not fond of the idea of constantly having to rub this clean. As far as practicality goes, these three laptops share similar traits, such as screens that can be easily adjusted with a single hand and lean back to about 145 degrees, grippy rubber feet on the bottom, and a good set of ports on the sides. The smaller G14 gets USB-A and USB-C ports, HDMI and a headphone jack, while the 15-inch models also get a LAN connector. None of them include a card reader or support Thunderbolt 3, but the Zephyrus G14 and G15 both allow power delivery through the USB-C port, while the A15 does not. However, the A15 gets a webcam at the top of the screen, and there's no included webcam on either of the Zephyrus laptops. That allowed Asus to shrink the bezels on the sides and the top, but some of you might still find this aspect to be a deal breaker. The A15 also lines most of the I/O on the left side and towards the back of the laptop, so it will feel the less cluttered of the three when hooking up peripherals. The Zephyrus models line the ports on both sides towards the middle and front of the chassis, as the back is reserved for the thermal module. Now, the components run hot with games and demanding tasks on all these laptops, but for different reasons. The G14 is a smaller device with powerful hardware for its class, and despite its elaborate thermal design, there's no way to beat physics when cramming 100 watt of CPU and GPU power in a 14-inch chassis. The G15 gets the same kind of hardware in a larger 15-inch body, but a more basic thermal module, and its fans are covered with a plastic film, so it runs just as hot of the G14, if not hotter. Finally, the A15 hits the same kind of high temperatures, but with a 45 watt processor and 90 watt GPU, so it's also the far more competent option in games. Furthermore, lower tier configurations with GTX 1650 Ti and 1660 Ti run a fair bit cooler, and the A15 also spreads the least amount of heat onto the keyboard and underside, thus is the more comfortable to game on for hours at a time. In conclusion, the two Zephyrus models are lighter and more portable, but sacrifice on the performance and thermals. That's easier to accept on the smaller G14, but less so on the 15-inch G15, which is a lot closer in size to the more capable A15s. Still, what is the performance difference between these platforms? We've reviewed these configurations of the G14, G15 and A15 notebooks, and we'll show you what to expect in terms of benchmark results, real-life workloads and gaming experience. The Zephyrus models are both based on AMD Ryzen HS APUs, the premium hardware meant to offer excellent performance within a 35 watt power envelope compared to the 45 watt TDP of the regular Ryzen H APUs implemented in the A15s. And indeed they're within 10% of the full power versions in Cinebench, Geekbench, 3D Mark or Blender and Handbrake. Pause the slides to carefully look at the results and make sure to check the reviews on the sites for more detailed performance logs and analysis. I've linked them for you in the description. The A15 steps ahead in GPU tests though, and especially in games, as it runs on the full power GTX and RTX graphics chips, while the G14 and G15 only get Max-Q versions of the same chips. The RTX 2060 90W configuration of the A15 is the most capable option here, with the GTX 1660 Ti version in the same A15 at roughly 90% of its performance, and the Max-Q implementations in the Zephyrus notebooks at 70 to 85%. Again, pause the slides to closely look at all this data. Performance aside though, you should also consider the hardware differences between these laptops. The A15 offers the wider upgrade path with 2 memory slots and 2 M.2 SSDs, as well as either a 90-watt battery or a 48Wh battery plus a hard drive cage, depending on the configuration. On the G14 and G15, part of the memory is soldered, so there's only one available RAM slot, as well as either a single SSD slot on the G14 or 2 SSD slots on the G15. Both also get a 76Wh battery, so they won't last as long on a charge as the 90-watt version of the A15. For reference, expect 4 to 5 hours of multitasking and 8 to 10 of video on the 90W A15 models, and 3 to 4 hours of multitasking and 6 to 8 of video on the Zephyrus laptops. However, also keep in mind that the G14 and G15 come with smaller power bricks and also support USB-C charging, while the A15 gets a bulkier and heavier brick, especially on the RTX 2060 version. That's not all though. To complicate things even further, you'll also need to consider the screens and inputs on these three in your decision. The Zephyrus G14 clearly wins on inputs with an excellent keyboard and a nice glass clickpad. It only gets white and fairly dim illumination though, which makes the keys challenging to read in the dark, especially on the white model with silver keys. The A15 comes as the second choice with a full keyboard layout and brighter RGB lighting, as well as a touchpad with physical click buttons. It's still rather small though, and the keys feel somewhat mushy and not as comfortable as those on the G14. Finally, the G15 comes last here with a shallower white backlit keyboard and a clunky plastic clickpad. None of them offer biometrics with the exception of the G14 that integrates a finger sensor in the power button. However, the G15 wins at the screen options as it's the only one available with a punchy and fast 240Hz display with 3 millisecond response and 100% sRGB coverage. In comparison, the A15s stop at a 144Hz display with lower brightness and washed out 62% sRGB colors, as well as slower response that leads to ghosting in games. As for the G14, this one is available with either a 120Hz panel, but again limited by slower response times, or a QHD 60Hz screen with 100% sRGB coverage, but with limited brightness and not an ideal option for games, plus also an expensive extra only available on the higher tier configurations. Now, speaking of prices, the TUF A15s are by far the most affordable options here, with the Ryzen 7 GTX 1660 Ti model starting at around $1,000. The G15 starts at $1299 for a similar configuration, but in the HS Max Q variant, while the G14 is expected to go for around $1249 for a similar model, but at a later date as it's not available right now. You can also find all these series in various other configurations, ranging from under $800 for the base A15s and up to $2,000 for the top G14s. For what is worth though, the TUF A15s are the best bang for your buck here. Sure, they're full-size laptops and don't feel or look as nice as some of the other options, but they offer the best performance and thermals for the least amount of money. Too bad there's no better screen option on this. I would have gladly paid $100 extra for that 240Hz panel offered with the G15 and the higher tier Asus gaming notebooks. At the other end, the Zephyrus G14 is a rather unique product right now, the only sub 15-inch notebook with this sort of abilities, features and performance. You're paying a premium for this, but you're also getting an excellent compact notebook, and those mid-tier configurations are actually competitively priced for what they are. Finally, there's the G15, and that 240Hz screen is pretty much the only reason to go with it over the other two. Otherwise, it's more expensive and not as powerful as the A15, and also larger and about the same price as the mid-range G14 configurations. That's why I feel this needs to drop in price in order to compensate for its quirks, and even then, it would still remain my third choice out of this bunch. With that in mind, this pretty much wraps up this comparison, but please let me know what you think about these notebooks in the comment section. I'd love to hear your thoughts and whether you agree or disagree with mine. Thanks for watching, and make sure to hit that thumbs up button if you enjoyed the video, as well as subscribe to our channel for more of our work. Catch you later.